He was loved by everyone, but what happened behind closed doors no one expected. Jimmie J. Lee was a 20-year-old college student at the University of Mississippi, known for his bright personality and his openness about who he was. Outgoing, loved by friends, and active in his community, Jay seemed to have everything going for him. But one night in July 2022, he vanished. No one knew where he went, and no one suspected that a hidden secret, a private relationship with someone he trusted, would lead to a tragedy that shook an entire campus. The victim. Who was Jimmie J. Lee? Jimmie J. Lee was a 20-year-old college student at the University of Mississippi, also known as Ole Miss, in Oxford, Mississippi. Jay was known as friendly and social, openly gay, comfortable with his identity, well-liked among friends and classmates. He was active on social media, expressive, and unafraid to be himself. To those around him, Jay was someone who lived openly and believed his life was in danger. The other man, Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. was 25 years old and also connected to Ole Miss. Unlike Jay, he was not openly gay. He kept his personal life private. He avoided public discussion about his relationships. According to investigators, Harrington and Jay had been communicating privately. What many people didn't know at the time was that the two allegedly shared a secret relationship. This difference, one man open, the other hiding, would later become central to the case. The last night, July 7 to 8, 2022. On the night of July 7, 2022, Jay was messaging friends normally. Nothing seemed unusual. Late that night, Jay went to Harrington's apartment. Investigators later confirmed Jay was seen on surveillance cameras near the apartment. Phone data placed him there. This meeting was not random. In the early morning hours of July 8, cameras captured Jay leaving the apartment area. That moment became the last confirmed sighting of Jay Lee alive. Something is wrong. The disappearance. After leaving the apartment, Jay stopped responding to messages. His phone activity suddenly ended. Friends noticed his silence almost immediately. When Jay failed to return home or answer calls, concern quickly turned into fear. Later that day, his family officially reported him missing. What started as a missing person case soon became something much darker. The car that changed everything. Police later found Jay Lee's car abandoned in a different location. Important details. No signs of an accident. No sign Jay intended to leave the car appeared deliberately left. This discovery changed the investigation. Authorities now believed Jay had not disappeared voluntarily. The case shifted from missing person suspected foul play. Digital evidence reveals a secret. As investigators analyzed phones and data, they uncovered critical evidence. Text messages between Jay and Harrington. Intimate conversations, deleted messages. Online searches related to violence and concealment. Prosecutors later argued these findings showed a hidden relationship, a growing fear of exposure, a possible motive tied to secrecy. Harrington became the primary suspect. Arrest without a body. Even though Jay's body had not yet been found, authorities believed they had enough evidence. Weeks after the disappearance, Harrington was arrested, charged with capital murder. Charging someone without a body is rare, but prosecutors believed the digital trail, timeline, and behavior after Jay's disappearance told a clear story. The first trial and a mistrial. The case went to trial, but there was a major challenge. Jay's body had still not been found without physical remains. Jurors struggled to reach a unanimous verdict. The trial ended in a mistrial for Jay's family. The pain continued. No body, no closure, no verdict. The breakthrough. Body discovered in February 2025. Investigators made a devastating discovery. Jay Lee's remains were found in Carroll County, Mississippi. Because of decomposition. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but the discovery confirmed what many feared: Jay was dead. This discovery allowed the case to move forward again. Guilty plea and sentencing. Rather than face a second full trial, Harrington made a decision. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, tampering with evidence in December 2025. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in prison, 30 years for murder, additional time for evidence tampering. The court emphasized motive, the desire to hide the relationship. The meaning behind the case. This was not just a crime, it was a tragedy shaped by fear of exposure, social pressure, secrecy, internal conflict. Jay lived openly. Harrington lived in fear. That difference had fatal consequences. The motive, fear, exposure, and control. As the case moved forward, prosecutors focused on one central question. Why did this happen? According to investigators, the evidence pointed to fear of exposure as the primary motive. Jay Lee was openly gay and comfortable with who he was. He did not hide his identity, nor did he feel shame about his relationships. Harrington, on the other hand, allegedly lived in constant fear that their connection would become public. This imbalance created tension. Messages between the two suggested Jay was becoming more confident. Harrington was becoming more anxious. The relationship was increasingly difficult to control. Prosecutors argued that Harrington feared damage to his public image, social judgment, exposure of a relationship he was not ready to acknowledge. Rather than ending the relationship in a healthy way, the situation escalated. Behavior after the disappearance. Investigators paid close attention to Harrington's actions after Jay vanished. They noted inconsistent statements to police, attempts to distance himself from Jay, suspicious online searches, digital traces suggesting efforts to erase communication. These behaviors were not proof on their own, but when combined with the timeline, the digital evidence, the abandoned car, the discovery of Jay's remains, they painted a consistent picture for prosecutors. This pattern became a key factor in the guilty plea. The family's search for answers. For Jay Lee's family, the legal process was only part of the pain. For years, they waited for answers. They lived without knowing where Jay was. They endured public trials and media coverage. Jay's father later spoke about the emotional toll of uncertainty, the pain of losing a son who lived authentically, the hope that Jay's story would help protect others. Their courage became part of the case's legacy. The lasting impact. Jay Lee's case left a permanent mark on the University of Mississippi, the Oxford community, national conversations about LGBTQ+ safety. It reminded the public that secrecy fueled by fear can be dangerous. Acceptance saves lives. Violence rooted in denial has real consequences. Even years later, the case continues to be discussed, not because of sensational details, but because of the human cost behind it. What this case ultimately reveals when looking at the full picture, the case of Jimmie, Jay Lee reveals more than a sequence of events. It exposes how personal fear, when mixed with social pressure, can spiral into irreversible consequences. This was not a crime driven by money, revenge, or strangers. According to prosecutors, it stemmed from a private relationship that one person accepted openly, and another could not. J. Lee lived without hiding. Harrington lived with fear of being seen. That contrast became the silent tension behind everything that followed. Why the case was so difficult to solve. One reason this case lasted years was the absence of a body for a long time. Without physical remains, prosecutors relied heavily on digital evidence. Phone data, messages, and timelines became critical behavior after the disappearance mattered more than usual. This case showed how modern investigations now depend on cell phone location tracking, online activity, surveillance footage, deleted digital footprints. Even when someone tries to erase the past, technology often preserves it. Justice, but not closure. Harrington's sentence ensured accountability under the law. He will spend decades in prison. But justice does not always mean closure. For Jay's family, a sentence could not bring him back. Years of uncertainty left emotional scars. The truth came slowly and painfully. What they gained was answers, not healing, and for many families in similar cases, that distinction matters. Why J. Lee's story still matters. J. Lee's story continues to matter because it reflects ongoing realities. Many people still feel pressured to hide who they are. Fear of judgment can shape dangerous decisions. Silence and secrecy can isolate people when they need support. His case reminds communities, schools, and families that acceptance is not abstract. It has real consequences. The silence before the truth. One of the most haunting elements of this case was the silence that followed J. Lee's disappearance. For months, there were no answers, no body, no clear explanation. Friends replayed their last conversations with Jay, wondering if they missed a warning sign. Family members held on to hope, even as time passed and leads ran dry. Each day without information deepened the uncertainty. Investigators continued working quietly in the background, knowing that one small piece of evidence could change everything. How time worked against everyone. Time complicated the case in many ways. For police, evidence became harder to recover. Memories faded. Digital data required deeper forensic work. For the family, hope slowly turned into fear. Waiting became emotionally exhausting. Closure felt increasingly distant, and for the case itself, the absence of physical remains weakened public confidence. Doubt began to spread online. Speculation replaced facts. This period tested everyone involved. Public speculation and online pressure. As weeks turned into months, the case drew attention online. Social media users shared theories, questioned timelines, debated motives. Some discussions helped keep Jay's name visible. Others spread confusion or misinformation. Investigators later emphasized that public pressure can both help and harm a case, bringing attention but also creating noise that distracts from verified facts. Why prosecutors stayed patient. Despite the pressure, prosecutors chose patience over speed. They focused on building a case that could stand in court, waiting for evidence strong enough to avoid acquittal, protecting the integrity of the investigation. Charging someone too early, or without enough proof, could have meant losing the case forever. This careful approach would later prove critical. A case that refused to disappear. Even during periods of silence, J. Lee's case never truly went cold. Detectives continued rechecking data, revisiting locations, reviewing digital evidence with updated tools. Behind the scenes, the case remained active, waiting for the moment when the truth could finally surface. The case reopens when everything changed. For a long time, the investigation moved quietly. Then, everything changed. In early 2025, investigators received information that led them to re-examine rural areas outside Oxford, Mississippi. These were places previously searched, but now revisited with renewed focus and updated investigative methods. This moment marked a turning point. Authorities did not publicly explain what triggered the renewed search, but behind the scenes, detectives followed leads they believed were credible and specific. The discovery. In February 2025, human remains were discovered in Carroll County, Mississippi. Soon after forensic examination, authorities confirmed what J. Lee's family had feared for years. The remains belonged to Jimmie J. Lee. For investigators, this discovery confirmed the case had always been a homicide. For the family, it ended years of uncertainty, but replaced it with irreversible grief. Why the discovery mattered legally. Although the condition of the remains meant the exact cause of death could not be determined, the discovery was still legally powerful. It allowed prosecutors to confirm Jay was deceased, strengthen the existing charges, move forward without relying solely on circumstantial evidence. The location of the remains also supported earlier investigative theories about concealment and effort to avoid detection. The emotional impact on the family. For Jay's family, this moment brought conflicting emotions. There was pain from confirmation of loss, relief from no longer living in uncertainty, exhaustion after years of waiting. Jay's father later spoke about how the discovery did not bring peace, but it brought truth. And sometimes, truth is the only form of closure the law can offer. Harrington's sentence. The court sentenced Harrington to 40 years in prison total, 30 years for murder, additional years for tampering with evidence. The decision meant Harrington would spend decades behind bars, ensuring he could not harm anyone else. For prosecutors, the sentence was a legal victory. For the family, it was a measure of justice, though it could never bring Jay back. Jay's father speaks. During the hearing, Jay's father delivered an emotional impact statement. He spoke about the loss of his son, a young man full of life, the years of waiting and uncertainty, the hope that sharing their story would encourage acceptance, honesty, and empathy in the community. His words resonated beyond the courtroom, reminding everyone present of the human cost behind the case. Community observes. The courtroom was a reflection of the broader impact. Friends and classmates of Jay were visibly moved. Advocates for LGBTQ+ safety noted the importance of the case as a cautionary example. The community recognized that the tragedy was not just an isolated event, but part of a larger conversation about identity, secrecy, and acceptance. After the verdict, what happened next? After the sentence was handed down, the case did not simply fade away. Court documents were finalized, appeals were discussed, and victim impact statements became part of the permanent record. Jay Lee's family chose to speak publicly, not to relive the details of the crime, but to make sure Jay was remembered for who he was, not just how he died. Media coverage shifted tone. Early reports focused on the shock of the crime. Later coverage examined patterns, secrecy, fear of exposure, and how hidden relationships can escalate into control and violence. Legal analysts pointed out how investigators reconstructed the timeline using digital footprints, messages, call logs, location data, showing how modern cases are increasingly solved through technology. On campus and in surrounding communities, the case triggered policy reviews. Discussions about student safety, reporting mechanisms, and support systems for LGBTQ+ students gained urgency. Workshops, forums, and memorial events were organized, not as protests, but as spaces for conversation and prevention. For law enforcement, the case became a reference point. Training sessions highlighted how motive can be rooted in social pressure and internal conflict, not just financial or personal gain. Detectives emphasized the importance of recognizing relationship-based violence, even when the relationship itself is hidden. The crime was solved. The court spoke. The record is closed. But the impact continued, quietly influencing policies, awareness, and how similar cases are investigated in the future. The court made its decision. Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. was sentenced to decades in prison. Justice, in the eyes of the law, was served. But for Jay's family, nothing could bring him back. His smile, his courage, and his honesty could never be replaced. Jay's story reminds us that secrecy, fear, and societal pressure can have deadly consequences. Living authentically should never be punished with tragedy. Communities, schools, and families are left with a lesson: support, acceptance, and open conversation save lives. Jay may be gone, but his life continues to inspire. His story is now a call to protect, to listen, and to care. Justice ended the legal case, but the lesson will never end. Thanks for watching this case. If you want to see the next shocking story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. See you in the next video.